welcome to round one with Bant Eldrazi. Uh, we are on the play, which is always lucky in Modern. And the hand I keep is pretty standard. It's a little slow. You don't have a turn 3 Seer, but you've got multiple pieces of interaction. There's not really a ton of exciting stuff going on that you could mulligan into that's significantly better than this, I think. Especially on the play, you're going to be able to Thought Not Seer with this removal, keeping you alive most of the time. Leading on tower might be kind of loose relative to Ghost Quarter, but I guess mising out with the turn 3 Tron's a little better than full on. I don't think full on revealing is a huge issue. I'm going to have to play one of those Tron lands against like a Spreading Seas deck anyways. And so my opponent leads on exactly a mirror Tron match of some kind. I don't really know if they're true Tron or Eldrazi Tron, so I fire a Chalice for one with the logic that if they're true Tron, I'm going to shut off their stirrings, I'm going to shut off their additional maps, their chromatics. In this case, they are in fact the actual mirror as exposed by this waste, so it's not going to do a ton. And exposing this land first, I mean, I can draw the third Tron piece and get really lucky, but playing the Temple the previous turn wouldn't actually help me get anywhere. Leaving up Dismember I don't think really helps if I draw like a second Temple. So, obviously, play the spell that I have the mana to cast. Wow, very important decision. And to reveal those cards, my opponent had Matter Reshaper, Warping Whale, Walking Ballista, Dismember, Expedition Map, and Thought Not Seer. I selected Thought Not Seer. So going through the hand, I think there's two pretty obvious choices. You can either take... So Matter Reshaper is just kind of a do-nothing. Expedition Map's blanked by Chalice. How lucky I cast it there. Warping Whale, kind of a do-nothing. Walking Ballista is a fine card, but I have it basically locked down with Dismember, and it doesn't affect the creatures I have. So that leaves Dismember and Thought Not Seer. So I can take Dismember, let my opponent seer my next creature or removal spell, and then play this fight. I wasn't huge on that because that lets my opponent start actually playing the game. Or I can take Thought Not Seer, let my opponent dismember my Thought Not Seer, and then just start smashing large creatures at my opponent. To which, if they use the Dismember, they just have no answers. Their cards in their hand just don't interact with what I'm doing. So I think that was a pretty clear case of, just take their Thought Not Seer. Also, if I leave Thought Not Seer, they can always just trade Seer for Seer, and it's the same thing as Dismember, but they're up 4 life. And a card out of my hand, which is pretty good. So they obviously go for a Temple, Fire Dismember, and a Matter Reshaper for full mana efficiency. Crash, Bash, not a lot of thought there. I mean, this is classic Eldrazi Mirror. Whoever plays more big creatures wins. My opponent has luckily drawn a Thought Not Seer, which they use to take my Dismember, leaving me with just Endbringers. And here, I am perfectly willing to offer the Reality Smasher for Thought Not Seer trade, because it does in fact allow me to draw another land potentially and cast Endbringer. Can't do anything. It took me a second to realize that wasn't an Eldrazi because I'm just, all my spells are colorless. Why wouldn't they all be Eldrazi? I could Ghost Quarter to keep my opponent further from Tron, but they didn't have it, and I think I need to be able to draw into a normal land and cast Endbringer to get out of the spot I'm at, where I'm a little behind, but have a lot of potential to get ahead. Generic cards that don't matter, really. I mean, Spellskite redirecting an Endbringer trigger from here. This is going to get out of Endbringer range super fast, and if you want to redirect when I shoot you, that's fine by me. So I draw Temple, and now that I have 6 mana and can cast both Endbringers, I'm going to use the Ghost Quarter, minimize the odds of me just getting lucked out of the game by a top deck Tron piece, allowing my opponent to kind of do whatever they want. Here my opponent is making an offer. The offer is I block, they spend their turn to add a counter to Ballista, and trade for Endbringer. However, this card is just great, and I would much rather just dominate the game with it than trade like it's really just Walking Ballista and a turn, and then my opponent also gets to cycle into something. That doesn't sound good at all to me. So here I can attack for free. If they don't block, they're actually in a pretty bad spot because they're dead in 2 turns to just Endbringer pings because I have the second one. Thought-Knot Seer is going to take Batterskull, but nothing else really matters. Now that my opponent's used... I guess my opponent could have attacked there. I also can't really attack into their Thought-Knot Seer, so they probably just should have attacked. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm just on the plan of throwing these at my opponent's face, so there's not really a real reason to use them for attacking or anything. Opponent reveals a hand of blank, 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 and blank. I'm required to take something, so I take Warping Whale because it technically makes an Eldrazi token. My opponent's going to be dead when I untap, and they show me that they drew yet another Expedition map. So, great job, Chalice. That was a 2 for 3 on that card's part. How lucky. Sometimes you just end up heading a mirror match. Okay, sideboarding here. Pretty easy swap. Chalice, it's a mirror match. My opponent's playing a Chalice deck. This card's probably not great against them. And then an All is Dust because, yeah, point to the non-colorless permanent. Then we had to dig. It's not super deep, but we got a Basilisk Collar, win some crappy creature, trade down stuff, shoot stuff down with Endbringer, which Visara mode seems unbeatable. Contortion doesn't really kill any of the creatures, but does make, teaming up to pick one off a little easier. Crucible lets me churn through their deck eventually with Ghost Quarter, keeping them off of dual lands. Karn's just a big threat that handles stuff. Walking Ballista is just another threat that, in theory, does interact. The sideboard options are shockingly not exciting, but I guess that's what you get for playing a colorless deck. So, game 2 of this Eldrazi Tron mirror. Yeah, we have Tron, Keep, Of. I didn't really think about the implications of what my opponent's turn 1 play implies, but I don't know enough about the deck's hands to really say at this point what kind of keepable hand range there is with this. It kind of implies they have natural Tron like I do, but at the same time they could also just have like a hidden temple that they then resolve later. So that kind of implies early Tron, but I'm going to do something here. So they don't have Tron, they just play Reshaper. I'm going to not crack the map under the logic that I go for it and then realize I want to be able to, with my hand, re-Tron to actually cast my spells if my opponent has a Ghost Quarter. I mean, I can Ghost Quarter one of their lands, but that's not coming for multiple turns. So here, I have the option of casting Endbringer, unprotected, kind of get a Dismember maybe, or I can Thought-Knot Seer. If they have a Seer, I take their Seer. I like Seer because leaving up Seer lets me Seer lets me leave up Map, which lets me guarantee Tron next turn to keep casting spells. So here it's just kind of a big sweat. If I take an Endbringer, they're going to have an Endbringer. So if I take Ulamog, that doesn't shut them off of anything, and they're still like they're like a Tron piece and another land away from casting Ulamog, and I think by that time, if they Tron up earlier, start representing it, I can Ghost Quarter them off of it. So the card that I think provides the unique effect I need to handle is Karn, so I'm going to take that. Plays a second Reshaper. And here, I'm going to make a completely boneheaded play on multiple levels. So, first thing I do, I attack. And that's just horrible. I know my opponent's kind of handlocked on just, like, nonsense. So there's no need for me to give them 3 cards. But I was like, okay, I can Spatial Contortion one of their creatures. And I'll get some value out of the attack. Especially because I can still cast Endbringer after casting Contortion. But it gets even worse because I very stupidly just misclick and target my own Seer, and we're just not even going to try to figure out what I was doing at that point. Fortunately for me, they just hit a dismember and a tower, which don't really do a ton. And I also misclicked through my second main phase here. It's just a disaster of a turn. Fortunately, I'm just very lucky and I draw a 10 drop. And I cast it, and I draw a million cards, and everything is really awesome. And then my opponent plays a card that costs the same as a card in my hand, and then I counter it because 12/12 doesn't care about Dismember in the slightest. And then my opponent gets Ghost Quartered off a Tron, and then opts to concede the game. You know, really embarrassing for me that this card is actually pretty great. Um, I think Ulamog probably would have equally won me the game, so I don't actually know if this card is good, but it wasn't bad, I guess. Um, I don't know. I'll have to try out different configs more.